Good evening. Welcome to Inside News. I'm Alexa, and this is October 12th, 2025. Tonight, we bring you stories that shape our world but often escape the spotlight. From credit upgrades in Cairo to mining regulations in Gaborone, from cyber campaigns in Brussels to diplomatic channels between Moscow and Washington, we cover the events that matter. Let's begin. We begin with tonight's major developments. Our lead stories tonight start in Africa, where economic and resource developments dominate the headlines. Egypt received a credit rating upgrade from S&P Global Ratings today. The country moves from B- to B, reflecting economic reforms under President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. GDP growth projections stand at 4.5% for the current fiscal year. The upgrade follows IMF-backed programs, currency devaluation, and subsidy cuts. Fitch had already affirmed similar improvements. Lower borrowing costs and increased foreign investment could follow, though inflation and debt levels remain concerns. In Botswana, new mining regulations took effect. All operations must now include 24% local ownership. Companies like De Beers and Lucara Diamond Corp face compliance requirements in a nation where mining generates over 30% of GDP. The Ministry of Minerals and Energy aims to enhance economic benefits for citizens. International firms may experience project delays as they adjust to the new framework. The European Union committed 11.5 billion euros to South Africa. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and South African President Cyril Ramaphosa formalized the agreement. Funds will support clean energy, infrastructure, and pharmaceutical projects. Green hydrogen production receives priority amid an energy crisis affecting 60 million people. The Global Gateway Initiative seeks to counter Chinese influence while reducing coal dependency. Projections suggest emissions could drop by 1 to 2 gigatons by 2050. Violence at a gold mine in Guinea led to charges against 60 individuals. At least 5 people died in riots over mining rights in the northeastern region. The interim military government under Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya responded with arrests. Tensions persist between artisanal miners and industrial operators like Société Minière di Dingarai. Mining accounts for 35% of GDP in Guinea. Community grievances require resolution to prevent deterring foreign investment. In Mali, Barrick Gold's Loulo-Gounkoto mine established a provisional administration to resume operations. Political instability and jihadist threats had disrupted production. The mine generates over 500,000 ounces of gold annually. Mining provides 75% of Mali's export revenues. Security challenges continue to threaten output and employment for thousands. South Africa faces campus unrest. Students at the University of Fort Hare shut down operations, demanding infrastructure improvements after fires damaged facilities. Over 20,000 students in the Eastern Cape Province are affected. The protests highlight ongoing higher education funding issues. Academic progress and economic mobility hang in the balance without resolution. Turning to Asia, tensions escalate as security concerns intensify. Chinese police issued rewards reaching $1,400 for information on 18 alleged Taiwanese military psychological operations officers. China's Ministry of State Security and Taiwan's defense forces under President Lai Ching-te are engaged. Military drills near Taiwan continue. Beijing intensifies efforts to counter perceived separatism. The action strains U.S.-China relations and raises miscalculation risks in the Indo-Pacific. ASEAN leaders discussed sending election observers to Myanmar for the junta's planned 2026 polls. Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto and Myanmar's military leader Min Aung Hlaing participated. The civil war has displaced over 3 million people. The initiative builds on the 5-point consensus from 2021, excluding opposition groups like the National Unity Government may prolong instability and humanitarian crises. North Korea and Vietnam agreed to enhance defense and economic cooperation. Leaders Kim Jong-un and To Lam focused on technology transfers and trade. UN sanctions have isolated Pyongyang. Vietnam's growing economy could bolster North Korea's capabilities. Regional security dynamics may shift, complicating denuclearization efforts on the Korean peninsula. Taiwan unveiled the T-Dome air defense system. President Lai Ching-te presented the system, developed with U.S. assistance, featuring advanced radar and missile interceptors. Deployment will cover key islands. Over 1,000 Chinese incursions occurred in Taiwan's air defense zone in 2025. The system strengthens asymmetric warfare strategy, but may prompt further arms races. Developing nations accrued $3.9 billion in net debt payments to China, according to a World Bank study. Pakistan and Sri Lanka are among key debtors. Beijing's Belt and Road Initiative loans exceed $1 trillion. Financial strain hinders post-pandemic recovery. Debt traps and geopolitical leverage raise concerns for regional stability. 3 people died in a light plane crash south of Sydney, Australia. The Australian Transport Safety Bureau opened investigations into the New South Wales incident. Safety concerns in regional aviation affect remote communities. Stricter regulations may follow, impacting tourism and essential services. We move now to Europe, where the continent confronts security threats and climate challenges. The Kremlin expressed concern over potential U.S. Tomahawk missile supplies to Ukraine. The conflict enters its 4th year, with over 500,000 casualties reported. Russian President Vladimir Putin and U.S. officials remain central actors. Escalating NATO involvement risks broader European security deterioration and increased defense spending. UK jets completed a 12-hour mission with US and NATO allies near Russia's border. The RAF and Pentagon coordinated operations involving F-35 aircraft. Baltic Sea tensions remain high. The exercise bolsters deterrence against Russian aggression, but carries escalation risks if misinterpreted. Dutch populist Geert Wilders suspended his campaign due to security threats. His Party for Freedom and intelligence agencies responded to far-right extremism concerns. Rising political violence in the Netherlands affects upcoming elections and fuels debates on free speech versus safety. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky noted Russia's strategic use of bad weather for attacks on energy infrastructure. Blackouts affect 40% of Ukraine's power supply. Moscow's military targets grids serving millions. The tactic prolongs humanitarian crisis. Europe must accelerate energy diversification to prevent winter collapses. Red weather warnings lifted in southeastern Spain after Storm Alice caused flooding. Thousands were displaced in Valencia. Spanish authorities and EU disaster response teams managed the aftermath. Damages reach an estimated €1 billion. Climate change impacts on Mediterranean regions demand enhanced flood defenses. The EU introduced new rules on political advertisements. The European Commission requires transparency on funding and targeting to combat disinformation. Platforms like Snapchat and YouTube face compliance challenges. The rules could enhance electoral integrity across 27 member states and reduce foreign interference. From Europe to the Americas, where nations grapple with security operations and institutional pressures. The U.S. military heightened counter-narcotics operations in Latin America. Pentagon officials and regional partners like Colombia increased naval and aerial patrols. Seizures rose 20% in 2025. Operations target drug flows linked to fentanyl epidemics, killing 100,000 Americans annually. Relations with Mexico face strain if the escalation appears unilateral. The U.S. Education Department announced layoffs due to budget constraints. Secretary Miguel Cardona cited congressional funding shortfalls. Federal student aid programs serve 45 million borrowers. Loan forgiveness initiatives may face delays, exacerbating inequality and influencing midterm elections focused on education affordability. A proposed class action lawsuit accuses Amazon of inflating Prime Day discounts using fictional list prices. Plaintiffs and FTC regulators target practices affecting millions of consumers. Potential damages reach billions. The case highlights e-commerce transparency issues and may lead to stricter pricing regulations. U.S. victims of the October 7th attacks filed a lawsuit against Hamas, Syria, Iran, and North Korea, seeking compensation for alleged support. Lawyers and the State Department build on prior judgments. The action could pressure international sanctions and affect Middle East diplomacy. Scientists estimated 14 million Latin Americans face unsafe arsenic levels in drinking water. Mexico and Argentina show particular concern. Researchers from the Pan American Health Organization reputed chronic exposure risks. The public health crisis requires regional water infrastructure investments with implications for migration and economic productivity. The Sudan Emergency Response Rooms emerged as a Nobel Peace Prize contender. Volunteers and UN agencies support over 10 million people affected by civil war. Recognition could boost humanitarian funding and influence global responses to underreported conflicts. That concludes our main coverage. Now, stories that need your attention. We continue with reports from beyond the mainstream spotlight. Starting with Africa, jihadist violence in Niger surged fourfold since foreign forces departed. Villagers far from the junta under General Abdourahmane Chiani face terror attacks killing hundreds. Groups like JNIM operate with restricted media access. Escalation threatens Sahel stability, fostering refugee flows and weakening regional counterterrorism efforts. Cameroonian opposition candidates forged alliances to woo Anglophone voters ahead of the October presidential election. Figures like Maurice Kamto address grievances in conflict-torn western regions, where over 6,000 have died since 2017. President Paul Biya's government faces pressure. Efforts might reduce secessionist tensions, but failure could prolong civil strife. Botswana's President Duma Boko intensified an anti-corruption campaign. The administration questions methods, despite public support in a nation ranked highly for African governance. Watchdog groups observe. Enhanced transparency could set a model for African democracies, though political polarization risks affecting investor confidence. Nigerian Modernism gained spotlight at London's Tate Modern. Curator Osei Bonsu focused on post-independence art. The exhibition could boost African cultural exports, fostering soft power and economic opportunities through tourism. South Africa's ambassador to France, Nafi Mthethwa, died with no foul play suspected. The Foreign Ministry investigated. The incident underscores vulnerabilities for African envoys, potentially leading to improved wellness protocols. Protests at Maseno University in Kenya saw lecturers in traditional attire demanding better conditions. Funding shortages affect 50,000 students. University administration and unions negotiate. Resolution could improve education quality, but persistence might exacerbate brain drain. Moving to Asia, Kremlin channels remained open to U.S. President-elect Trump amid fraying ties. Russian and U.S. diplomats focus on arms control and trade. Dialogue could avert escalations and shape the post-2024 global order. Japan's Sanae Takaichi rose as a key LDP figure with hawkish views on defense amid China tensions. Her ascent might harden Japan's stance, influencing alliances like Quad and regional deterrence strategies. Malaysian sailor Joao Figueiredo scored in an Asian Cup qualifier but faced FIFA ineligibility claims with 6 others. Football authorities investigate. The issue could disrupt team dynamics and affect Southeast Asian football development. Korean youths were kidnapped in Cambodia by crime gangs luring victims with fake jobs. Authorities in both nations responded. The trend highlights trafficking risks and might spur bilateral anti-trafficking pacts. Nobel laureate Shimon Sakaguchi was recognized for immunology work with Americans, advancing disease treatments. Asian medical innovations could accelerate, fostering international collaborations. China's rare earth export curbs hit back at U.S. criticisms. Trade officials engage amid broader tensions. The action could diversify sourcing and promote sustainable mining in Asia. Continuing in Europe, perceptions of tax fairness in Europe questioned if the rich pay adequately amid rising inequality. EU policymakers and surveys highlight issues. Addressing concerns could reform fiscal policies and reduce populism. Air traffic controller strikes in France threatened October flights over airspace. Unions and airlines like Ryanair anticipate disruptions. The situation could prompt EU aviation reforms impacting travel economies. The EU launched a cybersecurity campaign for October involving workshops to raise awareness. Commission and partners organized. Success might strengthen digital resilience and mitigate cyber threats. A new European Bauhaus Prizes awarded 22 winners for sustainable designs, fusing inclusion and aesthetics. The initiative could inspire green architecture and influence urban planning. Europe's Environment Report noted progress in emissions but ongoing biodiversity loss from overexploitation. Agencies like EEA reported. Conservation needs signal urgent policy shifts for ecosystem restoration. The EU proposed €1.6 billion for Valencia flood recovery, addressing October 2024 damages. Commission and Spanish authorities coordinated. The aid could model disaster response and enhance resilience. From Europe, also overlooked in the Americas, Venezuelan immigrants faced limbo with Trump's CBP app failing to deliver promised exits, stranding thousands. U.S. immigration shifts could exacerbate humanitarian strains and influence migration patterns. A quiet Dutch retiree aided in uncovering Nazi-stolen art in Argentina, linking to Holocaust restitution. Investigators and heirs involved. Recovery efforts might accelerate global claims. U.S. Men fell behind economically and educationally, fostering new masculinity movements. Researchers and influencers noted trends. The shift could reshape workforce dynamics and social policies. Cornell researcher halted artificial heart development for children, shutting his lab after 20 years. University and funding issues central. The setback might delay pediatric innovations. Photographers documented cumbia's spread across Americas, highlighting cultural fusion. The work could promote cultural diplomacy and preserve traditions. Sudan forces accused of atrocities alongside Congo per UN reports on war crimes. International bodies involved. Accountability pursuits might foster peace processes. Finally, developments in Oceania. Undeclared firearms were discovered on a foreign yacht in Fiji, sparking security probes. Local authorities investigate. The incident could tighten Pacific border controls. Campaign pushed for netball inclusion in Brisbane 2032 Olympics, rallying Pacific athletes. Sports bodies and advocates involved. Success might elevate women's sports and boost participation. Albanese expressed wariness over Chinese systems in Australian infrastructure due to security risks. Government and tech firms negotiate. The stance could diversify suppliers and enhance cybersecurity. First trilateral agreement among Pacific nations increased interoperability against Chinese influence. Leaders and military signed. the pact might strengthen alliances and foster stability. Melbourne trams offered free art and transport, promoting cultural access. City officials and artists collaborated. The initiative could model urban integration. Afghanistan-Pakistan border tensions erupted after airstrikes killing troops. Militaries clashed. Escalation risks regional spillover affecting diaspora communities. The events of October 12, 2025 reveal a world navigating resource tensions, security challenges, climate crises, and underreported humanitarian shifts. From credit upgrades in Cairo to defense pacts in the Pacific, from campus protests in Johannesburg to cyber campaigns in Brussels, these stories demand attention. International cooperation on security, sustainability, and equity remains essential to mitigate long-term instability and foster resilient growth. Thank you for watching Inside News. Good journeys to all.